The history of Christianity during the Middle Ages is the history of Christianity between the fall of Rome and the onset of the Protestant Reformation during the early 16th century, the development usually taken to mark the beginning of modern Christianity. This is the period in European history known as the Middle Ages, a medieval era. Among the dioceses, 5 held special eminence: Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria, generally referred to as the Pentarchy. The prestige of most of these sees depended in part on their apostolic founders, or in the case of Byzantium, Constantinople, that it was the new seat of the continuing Roman or Byzantine Empire. These bishops considered themselves the spiritual successors of those apostles. In addition, all 5 cities were early centers of Christianity. Early Middle Ages. The early Middle Ages commenced with the deposition of the last Western Roman emperor in 476, to be followed by the barbarian king Odoacer, to the coronation of Charlemagne as Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III in Rome on Christmas Day 800. The year 476, however, is a rather artificial division. In the East, Roman imperial rule continued through the period historians now call the Byzantine Empire. Even in the West, where imperial political control gradually declined, distinctly Roman culture continued long afterwards. Thus historians today prefer to speak of a transformation of the Roman world rather than a fall of the Roman Empire. The advent of the early Middle Ages was a gradual and often localized process whereby, in the West, rural areas became power centers whilst urban areas declined. With the Muslim invasions of the 7th century, the western and eastern areas of Christianity began to take on distinctive shapes, whereas in the East the Church maintained its structure and character and evolved more slowly. In the West, the bishops of Rome were forced to adapt more quickly and flexibly to drastically changing circumstances. In particular, whereas the bishops of the East maintained clear allegiance to the Eastern Roman Emperor, the Bishop of Rome, while maintaining nominal allegiance to the Eastern Emperor, was forced to negotiate delicate balances with the barbarian rulers of the former Western provinces. Although the greater number of Christians remained in the East, the developments in the West would set the stage for major developments in the Christian world during the later early medieval papacy. After the Italian peninsula fell into warfare and turmoil due to the barbarian tribes, the Emperor Justinian I attempted to reassert imperial dominion in Italy from the east against the Gothic aristocracy. The subsequent campaigns were more or less successful, and an imperial exarchate was established for Italy, but imperial influence was limited. The Lombards then invaded the weakened peninsula, and Rome was essentially left to fend for itself. The failure of the East to send aid resulted in the popes themselves feeding the city with grain from papal estates, negotiating treaties, paying protection money to Lombard warlords, and, failing that, hiring soldiers to defend the city. Eventually the popes turned to others for support, especially the Franks. Spread beyond the Roman Empire as the political boundaries of the Roman Empire diminished and then collapsed in the West, Christianity spread beyond the old borders of the empire and into lands that had never been under Rome. Irish and Irish missionaries. Beginning in the 5th century, a unique culture developed around the Irish Sea consisting of what today would be called Wales and Ireland. In this environment, Christianity spread from Roman Britain to Ireland, especially aided by the missionary activity of St. Patrick. Patrick had been captured into slavery in Ireland, and following his escape and later consecration as bishop, he returned to the isle that had enslaved him so that he could bring them the gospel. Soon, Irish missionaries such as S.S. Columba and Columbanus spread this Christianity, with its distinctively Irish features, to Scotland and the continent. One such feature was the system of private penitence, which replaced the former practice of penance as a public rite. Anglo-Saxons English. Although southern Britain had been a Roman province, in 407 the imperial legions left the Isle, and the Roman elite followed. Sometime later that century, various barbarian tribes went from raiding and pillaging the island to settling and invading. These tribes are referred to as the Anglo-Saxons predecessors of the English. They were entirely pagan, having never been part of the empire, and although they experienced Christian influence from the surrounding peoples, they were converted by the mission of St. Augustine sent by Pope Gregory the Great. Later, under Archbishop Theodore, the Anglo-Saxons enjoyed a golden age of culture and scholarship. Soon, important English missionaries such as S.S. Wilfrid, Willibrord, Lullas and Boniface would begin evangelizing the Saxon relatives in Germany. Franks, the largely Christian Gallo-Roman inhabitants of Gaul, were overrun by Germanic Franks in the early 5th century. The native inhabitants were persecuted until the Frankish king, Clovis I, converted from paganism to Roman Catholicism in 496. Clovis insisted that his fellow nobles follow suit, strengthening his newly established kingdom by uniting the faith of the rulers with that of the ruled. Frisians of the Low Countries. In 698, the Northumbrian Benedictine monk, Willibrord, was commissioned by Pope Sergius I as Bishop of the Frisians in what is now the Netherlands. Willibrord established a church in Utrecht. Much of Willibrord's work was wiped out when the pagan Radbod, king of the Frisians, destroyed many Christian centers between 716 and 719. In 717, the English missionary Boniface was sent to aid Willibrord, re-establishing churches in Frisia and continuing to preach throughout the pagan lands of Germany. Boniface was killed by pagans in 754. Iconoclasm. Iconoclasm as a movement began within the Eastern Christian Byzantine Church in the early 8th century, following a series of heavy military reverses against the Muslims. Sometime between 726 to 730, the Byzantine Emperor Leo III the Isaurian ordered the removal of an image of Jesus prominently placed over the chalk gate, the ceremonial entrance to the great palaces of Constantinople, and its replacement with a cross. This was followed by orders banning the pictorial representation of the family of Christ, subsequent Christian saints, and biblical scenes. In the West, Pope Gregory III held 2 synods at Rome and condemned Leo's actions. In Leo's realms, the Iconoclast Council at Hieria, 754, ruled that the culture of holy portraits was not of a Christian origin and therefore heretical. The movement destroyed much of the Christian Church's early artistic history, to the great loss of subsequent art and religious historians. The iconoclastic movement itself was later defined as heretical in 787 under the Seventh Ecumenical Council, but enjoyed a brief resurgence between 815 and 842.